Good evening, everyone, and welcome back for another Taoism Explained video. This time we're going to go into chapter 20, and as always, I will read through 3 different translations before going into a little bit of interpretation. So our first version goes like this. When we renounce learning, we have no troubles. The ready yes, and the flattering yea, small is the difference they display. But mark their issues, good and ill, what space the gulf between shall fill. What all men fear is indeed to be feared, but how wide and without end is the range of questions asking to be discussed. The multitude of men look satisfied and pleased, as if enjoying a full banquet, as if mounted on a tower in spring. I alone seem listless and still, my desires having as yet given no indication of their presence. I am like an infant which has not yet smiled. I look dejected and forlorn, as if I had no home to go to. The multitude of men all have enough and to spare. I alone seem to have lost everything. My mind is that of a stupid man. I am in a state of chaos. Ordinary men look bright and intelligent, while I alone seem to be benighted. They look full of discrimination, while I alone am dull and confused. I seem to be carried about as on the sea, drifting as if I had nowhere to rest. All men have their spheres of action, while I alone seem dull and incapable, like a rude borderer. Thus I alone am different from other men, but I value the nursing mother, the Tao. The second translation is as follows. Abandon learnedness, and you have no vexation. The yes compared with the yea, how little do they differ? But the good compared with the bad, how much do they differ? If what the people dread cannot be made dreadless, there will be desolation. Alas, and verily, there will be no end to it. The multitudes of men are happy, so happy as though celebrating a great feast. They are as though in springtime ascending a tower. I alone remain quiet, alas, like one that has not yet received an omen. I am like unto a babe that does not yet smile. Forlorn am I, oh so forlorn. It appears that I have no place whither I may return home. The multitude of men all have plenty, and I alone appear empty. Alas, I am a man whose heart is foolish. Ignorant am I, oh so ignorant. Common people are bright, so bright. I alone am dull. Common people are smart, so smart. I alone am confused, so confused. Desolate am I, alas, like the sea. Adrift, alas, like one who has no place where to stay. The multitude of men all possess usefulness. I alone am awkward and a rustic too. I alone differ from others, but I prize seeking sustenance from our mother. And our final translation. Avoid learning if you would have no anxiety. The yes and the yea differ very little, but the contrast between good and evil is very great. That which is not feared by the people is not worth fearing. But oh, the difference, the desolation, the vastness between ignorance and the limitless expression of the Tao. Lao Tzu tells us to give up on our pursuit of learning if we want our troubles to cease. If we try to find answers, if we are looking too hard to find something, we might pass it by. If we try to collect vast amounts of information and intend to know all of the answers to life's questions, we are simply fooling ourselves. While we're engaged in the pursuit of knowledge, one implies that there is a difference between the knower and the known. One further implies that there is something to be learned that isn't already visible, or that, due to some circumstance, there is more to life than we originally thought. Obviously, this isn't true when we're talking about things like science and mathematics, language, trivia, and so forth, but more so things of moral and philosophical nature, the things that Lao Tzu was trying to impart upon us. So we must remember to keep our pursuit of scientific understanding separate from our philosophical studies. Well, the difference between yes and yea is such a simple issue that can oftentimes be thought of as a big deal. In a technical sense, yea is an affirmative vote, while yes is an expression of agreement. Imagine how scholars could squabble about such minor differences while missing the bigger picture all the while. I am made to think of a nightmarish and endless bibliography filled with hundreds of footnotes, littered with non-agreeing translations of a text and studies, some of which funded by financial competitors and shareholders, parties with differing political philosophies, and all the like. The point here is that we ought not get caught up in the fine print and the small details of things. The contrast between taste and distaste is much greater, after all, and can be explored more thoroughly without wasting one's time, even if we find that the opposing poles of difference between two things ends up being arbitrary in the end. Hint, hint. We are told to not fear that which is feared by others. The translation varies here, but I'd like to go a little bit into this idea. It certainly would have been a hell of a lot easier just to say something like, do not fear that which others fear. And then I could repeat endlessly how we should do away with the fear of aging, disease, death, the loss of loved ones, the changing of circumstances, and all of that. But anyways, one example is that many people are perfectly comfortable with public speaking. So why would we be afraid of it? We should take others' strengths and levels of comfort as an example of our own potential, as much as we can within our own experience. It isn't always easy, and it isn't always possible, though. But if someone else can do something, there isn't much reason that we can't do so as well, at least to some extent. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to slam dunk a basketball without the proper training, and if I was any shorter than I am, it would be nothing more than a pipe dream. Anyways, another example could be failure. Some of us are indeed afraid of failing, and many people spend much of their lives not acting due to the fear of failure. However, we can quite obviously see, at least in modern times, that people are increasingly unwavering when it comes to the fear of failure. Business enterprises start and shut down. Relationships begin, blossom, and flower before they quickly wilt and die. But people tend to move on and try again until they get it right, or die trying. You see, it's the small things like this that we don't usually think about to a great extent. We kind of just assume that everyone is afraid of failing, but we never really see the thought process through to the end and see that we were wrong about our presupposition. And this can be said for so many other things in life, like social rejection, confrontation, a lack of personal purpose. The list goes on and on and on. Well, in the next section, Lao Tzu kind of seems to go off. He tells us that everyone else seems satisfied and pleased, as if they look down at the world after eating a grand feast. And while he sees this happening, he feels alone, as if he is just floating by. He has nothing to know, and he has nowhere to go. And he likens himself to a child before it learned to smile, an empty canvas without a subject. First of all, he obviously sees himself as different than other people. The things that he has discovered about his very existence have put him at odds with the rest of society. He can't just go back into life as if nothing happened and conform to the social norms of the age. He has no desire to dilly-dally around, eating and intoxicating his mind with garbage all day with no purpose. He wants to be in the moment. He not only wants to, he knows that that's the only option that he has. He lives in accord with the Tao, which these other people obviously do not. He has no one, but knows that the universe itself birthed him, and he's formed a deep connection with it in his heart. He chose this very path himself, in fact. He exiled himself from the rest of humanity. And there is no possible way that, after coming to some of the conclusions that he did, he could deny what he realized. If he gave up his isolation and went back to the way things were before, he would be selling himself out and losing even more than he would gain. In a sense, this reminds me of the famous scene in The Matrix when Morpheus asks Neo if he wants to take the blue pill or the red pill. He can choose to go back into the Matrix and forget everything he learned about the true nature of reality, or he can go further down the rabbit hole and live his life in a new way. Now, we seem to forget all too easily that at the end of the day, all of us are alone. More so, we are crippled by a constant loneliness all the way down to our bones. We can see it in each other's eyes when we interact, even with those who are closest to us. And whether we follow what we think to be a path of truth, while everyone else follows what we think to be a path of falsity or confusion, the Tao continues to flow. The show goes on. The human life blossoms and blooms before returning back to the root, just as destiny intended. And while there surely is something to be said about those that are nourished by the Great Mother, the Tao. We cannot simply discount the experiences of everyone else around us and pretend that we are the only ones on a noble path. The very concept of a noble path is subjective and open to criticism. This is not the way. A closer estimation is one in which the suffering of everyone else is noted and respected. Your noble path may work for you, but what you consider to be holy and important may not be to me. And in many a case, what may seem noble and holy may turn out to be confusion. When we find ourselves in situations in which everyone else is full of joy, such as a party, we will either make an attempt to be included into the group by trying to fit in, or we will look at the group from the outside and reject it with some sort of viewpoint. Think about this from the perspective of your own life when you go into any function that includes a group of other people. Both of these options are futile. Like Lao Tzu says, being dim and stupid while the others are busy can bring us to a point of solitude in which we stop trying. We no longer make attempts to be liked and accepted. We no longer fear showing our weaknesses to others. We realize that it simply doesn't matter. Things like social status become unimportant when we are aimless and going easy. The less we think we know, the more clearly we begin to see. The less we speak, the more we say. And the more we slow down, the closer to ourselves we become. And this translates into our daily lives very directly. We stop ourselves when we see signs of fanaticism coming into our interactions. We respect other beings and their ways. And as a newborn babe, before it learns to smile, our lives become more simple as we trust that the Tao will continue to nourish us.